The shuttle's engines hummed quietly as Zara Chen pressed her face against the small window, watching Earth grow larger. At 14, she had already done what most adults could never imagine. 3 alien empires had fallen before her strategic mind and unbreakable will: the Cytherian hegemony, the Vorthon Collective, and the dreaded Nexari Commonwealth all learned to fear the name of a human child who refused to surrender. Now she was coming home. The medal ceremonies felt like distant memories. Standing before the Galactic Council, accepting their highest honors while representatives from dozens of species bowed their heads in respect. The Cytherians, tall and proud with their crystalline skin, had called her the Little Death, after she dismantled their war machine using nothing but captured supply ships and brilliant tactics. The Vorthons, with their multiple arms and calculating minds, named her the Impossible Variable, when she turned their own mathematics against them. But Earth's leaders had made their decision. She needs a normal childhood, they said. She deserves to be a regular teenager. Zara laughed bitterly at the memory. Regular teenager? She had commanded fleets of starships across 3 star systems. She had negotiated treaties that would keep humanity safe for generations. She had stared down alien warlords who had conquered entire worlds and made them blink first. The shuttle touched down at the spaceport outside New Geneva. As she walked down the ramp, Zara felt the familiar weight of Earth's gravity. It had been 2 years since she left as a 12-year-old prodigy. Now she returned as something else entirely. Her parents waited at the bottom of the ramp. Dr. Sarah Chen, a xenobiologist, and Professor David Chen, a theoretical physicist. They had supported her mission to the stars, understanding that their daughter's mind was too valuable to waste on normal childhood concerns. But now their faces showed relief mixed with worry. "Welcome home, sweetheart," her mother said, embracing her carefully. Zara had grown taller, but she also carried herself differently. There was a hardness in her posture, a constant alertness in her eyes that spoke of battles fought and won. "How do you feel about starting school?" her father asked as they walked toward the transport. Zara considered the question seriously. She had spent 2 years fighting wars against species that had mastered interstellar travel before humans discovered fire. She had learned to think in 3 dimensions while commanding ships moving at significant fractions of light speed. She had negotiated with minds that could process information faster than human computers. "It should be interesting," she said finally. The drive home took them through the rebuilt sections of Geneva. The Cytherian bombardment had destroyed much of the old city before Zara's victories ended the war. New buildings reached toward the sky, their designs incorporating lessons learned from alien architecture. Humanity was changing, adapting, growing stronger. But Westfield High School looked exactly the same as it did in the promotional videos they had shown her on the journey home. "You'll like it here," her mother said. Though her voice lacked conviction, "The principal, Mr. Morrison, knows about your achievements. He's promised to make sure you have a smooth transition." Zara nodded absently, watching teenagers her age walking through the school's courtyard. They moved in groups, laughing and talking about things she couldn't quite hear through the transport's windows. Their concerns seemed so simple, so manageable. No one was trying to kill them. No alien fleets hung in orbit above their world, waiting for orders to reduce everything they loved to cosmic dust. That evening, Zara sat in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by old toys and books that felt like artifacts from another person's life. Her military commendations sat in a secure case, each one representing a victory that had cost thousands of lives on both sides. The weight of those decisions pressed down on her shoulders. Her mother knocked on the door. "Dinner's ready. We made your favorite." Zara tried to remember what her favorite food had been before she left. The last 2 years had been filled with ration packs, alien cuisine during diplomatic functions, and the bitter taste of recycled air on long voyages between star systems. Simple pleasures felt foreign now. During dinner, her parents attempted normal conversation. They asked about her experiences but carefully avoided the details of combat and death. They wanted to hear about the interesting aliens she had met, the amazing technology she had seen, the worlds she had visited. They wanted stories of wonder and discovery, not accounts of the brutal realities of interstellar warfare. Zara obliged them, describing the crystal cities of Cytheria and the floating gardens of Vorthon Prime. She told them about the Nexari's mathematical art and the way space looked different when viewed through alien eyes. But she left out the parts about orbital bombardments, the screams of dying ships, and the terrible silence that followed each victory. Later that night, lying in her old bed, Zara stared at the ceiling and tried to imagine tomorrow, high school. Classes about subjects she had learned years ago. Teachers who would try to explain concepts she had already applied in life-or-death situations. Students who worried about tests and social drama while she carried the weight of 3 fallen empires. She closed her eyes and tried to remember what it felt like to be a normal child. The memory felt distant and strange, like trying to recall a dream after waking. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for the first time in years, Zara Chen wasn't sure she was ready to face them. Outside her window, the stars shone down on Earth, peaceful and quiet. But Zara knew the truth that her classmates didn't. Space was vast and full of dangers, and humanity's victories were still fragile. Someone would need to stand watch to be ready when the next threat emerged from the darkness between worlds. But apparently, that someone would have to wait until after chemistry class. The alarm clock's shrill cry cut through Zara's dreams of stellar coordinates and tactical formations. For a moment, she reached for the emergency alert button that should have been beside her bunk, ready to respond to incoming hostile vessels. Instead, her fingers found only a plastic clock showing 6:30 a.m. Monday morning. First day of high school. Zara dressed in the uniform her mother had carefully laid out the night before. The fabric felt strange against her skin after 2 years of military fatigues and environment suits. She examined herself in the mirror, trying to see what her classmates would see. A 14-year-old girl with dark hair and serious eyes, not the terror of 3-star systems. Not the architect of victories that had saved her species, just another freshman. The breakfast table conversation felt surreal. Her father discussed his latest research project while her mother planned her schedule for the xenobiology lab. Normal concerns for normal people living normal lives. Zara ate her cereal and wondered if they had forgotten that she once ate breakfast while reviewing casualty reports from the night's battles. "Remember," her mother said as they prepared to leave, "if anyone gives you trouble, just tell a teacher. High school can be challenging, but you're smart enough to handle anything they throw at you." Zara almost laughed. She had handled the combined might of alien war machines, but her mother was worried about teenage bullies. The transport ride to Westfield High felt like approaching an enemy position. Zara found herself analyzing sight lines and potential escape routes, habits that had kept her alive in actual war zones. The other students on the transport chatted about weekend parties and upcoming tests. Their biggest concern seemed to be whether Jake Morrison would ask Emma Valdez to the homecoming dance. Westfield High School sprawled across several acres, its buildings connected by covered walkways and surrounded by athletic fields. Students moved through the campus in predictable patterns, forming social clusters that Zara recognized as primitive hierarchical structures. The parallels to military organization were obvious, but these teenagers had no idea they were unconsciously following principles that governed armies across the galaxy. Principal Morrison met her at the main office, a kind-faced man in his 50s who spoke to her with careful respect. He clearly knew who she was, but was trying to treat her like any other student. "Welcome to Westfield, Miss Chen. I've looked over your academic records and we've placed you in our accelerated program. Your first period teacher is Mrs. Hamilton for Advanced Placement History." Zara accepted her schedule and locker assignment, noting that someone had made sure she wouldn't be bored by classes beneath her educational level. They had tried to prepare for her, but they had no real understanding of what they were dealing with. AP History turned out to be a discussion of ancient warfare tactics. Mrs. Hamilton, an energetic woman in her 40s, was explaining the strategic brilliance of Alexander the Great's campaigns. Zara listened with growing amusement, as the teacher praised tactical innovations that seemed laughably simple compared to 3-dimensional space combat. "Can anyone tell me why Alexander's use of the phalanx was so effective?" Mrs. Hamilton asked. Several hands went up. The answers focused on discipline, training, and the psychological impact of a wall of spears. "All correct, but missing the deeper principles. Miss Chen?" Mrs. Hamilton had noticed Zara's lack of participation. "What do you think made Alexander successful?" Zara considered her answer carefully. He understood that warfare is ultimately about information and timing. The phalanx was just a tool. His real advantage was superior intelligence gathering and the ability to make decisions faster than his enemies. He won battles before they started by knowing more about his opponents than they knew about him. The classroom fell silent. Mrs. Hamilton looked surprised by the sophistication of the answer. That's quite insightful. Have you studied military history before? You could say that, Zara replied. The morning continued with similar patterns. In advanced chemistry, she solved problems that reminded her of calculating fuel consumption for interstellar voyages. In mathematics, she worked through equations that were elementary, compared to the calculations needed for faster-than-light navigation. Each class presented challenges that felt like training exercises, compared to the real-world applications she had mastered. But it was during lunch that Zara encountered her first real problem. The cafeteria was a complex social battlefield, with invisible boundaries and unspoken rules. Students sat in clearly defined groups: athletes, academics, artists, and various subcultures. Zara, holding her tray and looking for a place to sit, found herself caught between territories like a ship drifting through contested space. "You can sit here if you want," said a voice behind her. Zara turned to see a girl about her age with curly red hair and an easy smile. "I'm Jessica Martinez. You're the new girl, right?" Zara nodded and followed Jessica to a table near the windows. The other students there seemed friendly enough, though their conversation topics felt alien to her. They discussed teachers, classes, and social events with an intensity that reminded her of strategic planning sessions, but focused on completely trivial objectives. "So where did you transfer from?" asked a boy named Marcus. "Your accent is interesting." Zara realized that 2 years of speaking with people from across the galaxy had changed the way she talked. She had picked up linguistic patterns from dozens of species, subtle inflections that marked her as someone who had traveled far beyond Earth. "I was homeschooled," she said, which was technically true. Being educated by military tutors while traveling between star systems counted as homeschooling. "My family moved around a lot." "That must have been hard," Jessica said sympathetically. "Making friends, keeping up with schoolwork." "I managed," Zara replied. The conversation continued, touching on sports, music, and movies that Zara had never heard of. She found herself studying her classmates like an anthropologist, trying to understand their motivations and social structures. It was fascinating in its way, but also deeply frustrating. These people had no idea how large the universe really was, how many threats existed beyond their small world. When the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, Zara gathered her things and prepared for afternoon classes. As she walked through the hallways, she overheard fragments of conversations that revealed the true scope of her classmates' concerns. Homework assignments, social media drama, weekend plans. Their problems were real to them, but they existed in such a narrow sphere. During physical education, the contrast became even more stark. Coach Williams had the class running laps around the gymnasium while he shouted encouragement and criticism. Zara completed the exercise without effort, her conditioning maintained from years of military training. Around her, other students struggled with basic fitness requirements. "Chen," Coach Williams called out. "Good pace. You run track at your old school?" "Something like that," Zara answered, not mentioning that her running experience came from emergency evacuations during alien attacks. As the day progressed, Zara began to understand the true nature of her challenge. The academic work was trivial. The social dynamics were manageable, but the constant need to pretend, to hide what she really was, felt more exhausting than any battle she had fought among the stars. When the final bell rang, Zara walked toward the school exit with mixed feelings. She had survived her first day, but survival felt different when the stakes were so low. No lives hung in the balance. No civilizations would fall based on her decisions. She was just another student trying to fit in. But as she waited for her transport home, Zara noticed something that made her pause. A group of older students had cornered a younger boy near the bike racks. Their body language was aggressive, predatory. The boy looked scared and alone. For the first time all day, Zara felt something familiar stirring inside her. A situation that required action. A problem that needed solving. She began walking toward the confrontation, her mind automatically shifting into tactical mode. Some battles, she realized, were worth fighting regardless of the scale. The confrontation by the bike racks unfolded like a tactical scenario Zara had seen countless times. 3 older students, probably seniors, had positioned themselves to block the younger boy's escape routes. Their leader, a tall kid with aggressive posture, was demanding something while his friends flanked the target. Classic intimidation formation. Poor execution, but effective against an untrained opponent. Zara approached with measured steps, her mind automatically cataloging advantages and weaknesses. The aggressors were larger and older, but they moved like amateurs. No real discipline, no understanding of actual combat principles. They were used to winning through size and social position rather than skill. "Problem here?" she asked, her voice carrying the quiet authority she had learned from commanding starship crews. The leader turned toward her, his expression shifting from predatory confidence to annoyance. "Mind your own business, freshman. This doesn't concern you." "Tommy Chen," the cornered boy said quickly. "He's my cousin." Zara glanced at the boy, noting his quick thinking. He had just given her a social justification for intervention, even though they weren't actually related. Smart kid. She filed that observation away for later. "Actually, it does concern me," Zara said, moving closer. "Tommy, head to the transport. I'll be there in a minute." The boy started to move, but the leader stepped sideways to block him. "Nobody's going anywhere until we settle this. Your cousin owes us." "Owes you what?" Zara asked. "Respect," said one of the flankers, a stocky kid with mean eyes. "He bumped into Derek yesterday and didn't apologize properly." Zara felt a familiar cold sensation settling over her thoughts. It was the same feeling she had experienced before major engagements, when enemy commanders revealed their strategic weaknesses through their own words. These students weren't just bullies, they were stupid bullies who didn't understand the real nature of power. "Let me see if I understand this correctly," she said, her voice taking on the measured tone she had used during negotiations with alien diplomats. "You're demanding submission from someone smaller than you because he failed to show sufficient deference after an accidental contact. Is that accurate?" Derek, the leader, looked confused by her formal language. "What?" Yeah, he needs to learn some manners." "I see. And you believe that threatening violence will accomplish this educational goal?" "I'm not threatening anything," Derek said, but his posture suggested otherwise. "I'm just making sure he understands how things work around here." Zara nodded slowly. Around them, other students had begun to notice the confrontation. Some stopped to watch, forming a loose circle that reminded Zara of observers at gladiatorial contests. Except this wasn't entertainment. It was a test of the social order. "How things work," she repeated. "You're referring to a hierarchical system based on physical intimidation and social positioning. A primitive power structure maintained through displays of dominance." Derek's friends exchanged glances. One of them whispered, "What is she talking about?" But Derek seemed to understand that he was being challenged, even if he didn't follow the specifics. "Look, weird girl, I don't know where you transferred from, but here's how it works. Big fish eat little fish. Your cousin learned that lesson, and now you're about to." He stepped forward, probably expecting Zara to back down or call for help. Instead, she remained perfectly still, calculating distances and reaction times. Derek was strong but slow, accustomed to opponents who would fold under pressure rather than fight back. "Before we continue," Zara said, "I should mention that I've studied conflict resolution extensively. Would you be interested in a peaceful solution to this situation?" "Too late for that," Derek said, reaching out to grab her shoulder. Zara's response was swift and precise. She caught his wrist, applied pressure to a specific nerve cluster, and used his own momentum to send him stumbling backward. The move looked effortless, almost gentle, but Derek cried out in pain and surprise. "That was a warning," Zara said calmly. "Your nervous system has approximately 800 pressure points that can cause incapacitation without permanent damage. I'm familiar with most of them." The crowd of watching students fell silent. Derek clutched his wrist, staring at Zara with newfound respect and fear. His friends looked uncertain, their confidence shaken by seeing their leader neutralized so easily. "Who the hell are you?" Derek asked. Zara considered her answer. She could tell him the truth about commanding fleets and toppling empires, but that would create more problems than it solved. Instead, she chose a response that these students could understand. "I'm someone who's seen real fighting," she said, "and this isn't it. This is just social posturing by people who don't understand the difference between strength and power. She turned to Tommy, who was watching with wide eyes. "Come on, cousin. Let's go home." As they walked away, Zara heard Derek's friends whispering behind them. Word would spread quickly through the school's social networks. By tomorrow, everyone would know that the new freshman had faced down Derek Morrison and won without breaking a sweat. On the transport ride home, Tommy finally spoke up. "That was incredible. How did you do that?" "Training," Zara said simply. "And you're welcome." "I'm sorry I lied about being your cousin. I didn't know what else to do." Zara studied the boy more carefully. He was probably 12 or 13, small for his age, with intelligent eyes and nervous energy. The kind of kid who got picked on for being different, for thinking too much and fitting in too little. "What's your real name?" she asked. "Tommy Patterson. I'm in 8th grade. Derek and his friends have been hassling me since school started." "Why?" Tommy shrugged. "I'm in advanced classes with kids 2 years older. They think I'm showing off or something. Plus my dad works for the Space Defense Council, so they call me a space nerd." Zara felt a spark of interest. The Space Defense Council was one of the military organizations she had worked with during the war. "What does your father do there?" "Communications analysis. He monitors alien transmissions and stuff." Tommy looked embarrassed. "I know it sounds boring, but I think it's pretty cool. He's taught me some basic cryptography and signal processing." "That's not boring at all," Zara said. "That kind of work is crucial for planetary security." Tommy looked surprised by her serious response. Most adults either dismissed his father's work as too technical to understand or treated it like science fiction. "You really think so?" "I know so," Zara said. "Your father's work probably prevents more conflicts than most people realize." The transport reached Tommy's stop first. As he prepared to get off, he turned back to Zara. "Thanks again for helping me. I owe you one." "Just remember what you saw today," Zara said. "Bullies only have power if you give it to them. They're not as strong as they pretend to be." That evening, Zara sat in her room thinking about the day's events. The academic challenges had been trivial, but the social dynamics were more complex than she had expected. Her intervention with Derek would have consequences that rippled through the school's hierarchy. She had identified herself as a force to be reckoned with, which meant other challenges would follow. But she had also made a potential ally in Tommy Patterson. The boy was clearly intelligent and had access to information through his father's work. In the complex environment of high school, having reliable intelligence sources could prove valuable. Her mother knocked on the door. "How was your first day?" "Educational," Zara replied. "I learned a lot about local power structures and social dynamics." "Make any friends?" Zara considered the question. Derek Morrison certainly wasn't a friend, but their interaction had established important boundaries. Tommy Patterson showed promise as an ally. Jessica Martinez seemed genuinely kind, though naive about the larger universe. "I made some interesting contacts," she said finally. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Your father and I are so proud of how well you're adjusting." After her mother left, Zara accessed her personal computer and began researching her classmates. If she was going to navigate this social environment successfully, she needed better intelligence about the key players and their relationships. Derek Morrison turned out to be the principal's nephew, which explained his confidence in avoiding serious consequences for his behavior. Jessica Martinez was the daughter of a city council member and had a reputation for charity work. Tommy Patterson's academic records showed exceptional aptitude in mathematics and computer science. As she compiled her research, Zara realized she was approaching high school the same way she had approached military campaigns. Identify key figures, understand their motivations, map their relationships, and plan accordingly. The scale was smaller, and the stakes were lower, but the fundamental principles remained the same. Outside her window, the stars continued their ancient dance across the night sky. Somewhere among those distant suns, alien civilizations were rebuilding after the wars she had helped end. New threats were undoubtedly emerging from the darkness between worlds. But for now, Zara Chen's battlefield was Westfield High School, and she was beginning to understand that even small wars required serious strategy. Humanity had, before they revealed themselves, As she prepared for bed, Zara realized that her transition from galactic warfare to high school life had just become significantly more complicated. She was no longer just pretending to be a normal teenager. She was a normal teenager who had discovered that her war might not be over after all. But at least now she had allies. Tommy Patterson was proving to be an excellent intelligence operative, and his father's resources would be invaluable for monitoring the situation. Even Jessica Martinez, with her social connections and natural leadership abilities, might prove useful if the situation escalated. Zara smiled as she turned off her bedroom light. High school was becoming more interesting than she had expected, and if it turned out that she was still needed to defend humanity, she would be ready. Some battles, after all, were too important to leave to adults. 3 weeks into October, Zara's carefully constructed normal life began to unravel in ways she hadn't anticipated. The first sign of trouble came during advanced physics, when their substitute teacher turned out to be someone who definitely didn't belong in a high school classroom. Dr. Valdez was supposedly filling in for their regular teacher, who had called in sick with flu symptoms, but Zara noticed immediately that his knowledge of terrestrial physics was oddly limited, while his understanding of theoretical frameworks suggested experience with technologies that didn't exist in standard textbooks. When he discussed energy transmission principles, his examples referenced concepts that reminded Zara of Nexari power distribution systems. When a student asked about practical applications, he mentioned crystal matrix configurations that were distinctly Cytherian in design. Most troubling of all, his eyes kept drifting to Zara throughout the lesson with an intensity that suggested recognition. After class, Zara lingered until the other students had left, then approached his desk with a casual question about homework assignments. Up close, she could see details that confirmed her suspicions. His skin had the faint, translucent quality of someone who had spent time in artificial gravity environments. His movements were too precise, too economical, suggesting military training rather than academic background. "Interesting lecture, Dr. Valdez," she said. "Your perspective on energy dynamics is quite unique." "I've had some unusual educational experiences," he replied, his voice carrying a slight accent that reminded her of the border worlds where human and alien cultures intersected. "And you, Miss Chen, seem to have a remarkably sophisticated understanding of these concepts for someone your age." The way he said her name confirmed her worst fears. This wasn't a random encounter. He knew exactly who she was. "I've always been interested in science," she said carefully. "My parents are both researchers. Yes, I'm familiar with your family's work. And your own achievements, of course." His smile was polite but cold. "The Cytherian hegemony still speaks of you in their historical records. The little death who dismantled their greatest fleet with nothing but brilliance and determination." Zara felt her muscles tense for combat, but forced herself to remain calm. They were in a classroom full of security cameras and within shouting distance of other teachers. Whatever this man wanted, he wouldn't risk exposure by acting here. "I think you have me confused with someone else," she said. "I'm just a freshman trying to pass physics." "Of course. My mistake." His smile widened slightly. "Though I should mention that your friend Tommy Patterson's father has been asking some very interesting questions about those encrypted transmissions. It would be unfortunate if his research led him into dangerous territory." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Tommy and his father were now targets because of their investigation into the Cytherian signals. Zara had drawn them into a conflict they weren't equipped to handle. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Naturally. But perhaps you might mention to young Mr. Patterson that some puzzles are better left unsolved. For everyone's safety." Zara left the classroom with her mind racing through tactical possibilities. The enemy had revealed themselves sooner than expected, which suggested either confidence in their position or desperation to prevent further investigation. Either way, the situation had escalated beyond her ability to handle alone. She found Tommy at lunch sitting with Jessica and a few other students. His animated discussion of weekend plans felt surreal given the threat that now hung over him and his father. "Tommy," she said quietly, "I need to talk to you privately." They walked to their usual corner of the cafeteria, but Zara led him further away from other students. When she was certain they couldn't be overheard, she outlined her encounter with Dr. Valdez and the implications of his veiled threats. Tommy's face went pale as she explained. You're saying there's an alien spy working as a substitute teacher at our school? Not alien, Zara corrected. Human, but probably working for Catherian survivors or some other hostile group. The important thing is that they know about your father's research and they consider it a threat. What do we do? Should we tell someone? Call the authorities? Zara considered the options. Official channels would be slow and bureaucratic, assuming they believed the story at all. By the time proper security forces responded, the enemies would have disappeared or accomplished their objectives. We need more information first, she said, and we need to make sure your father is safe while we gather it. How do we do that? Carefully, and with help. That afternoon, Zara made a decision that would have seemed impossible a month earlier. She approached Jessica Martinez with a request that required revealing more about herself than she had planned. Jessica, I need to ask you for a favor that's going to sound crazy. They were walking toward the parking lot after school, and Jessica looked at her with concern. What kind of favor? The kind that might be dangerous but could help protect people from something much worse. Jessica stopped walking. Zara, you're scaring me. What's going on? Over the next 20 minutes, Zara explained as much as she could without revealing the full scope of her background. She described the mysterious transmissions, the suspicious substitute teacher, and the potential threat to Tommy's family. She presented it as a case of possible espionage that required careful investigation. So you want me to help you spy on a teacher who might be an enemy agent? Jessica asked when Zara finished. I want you to help us gather information that could prevent people from getting hurt, Zara said. Your mother is on the city council. She has connections with local law enforcement and security services. If we can document evidence of suspicious activity, she might be able to get proper authorities involved. Jessica was quiet for a long moment, weighing the request against her normal, safe worldview. Finally, she nodded. What do you need me to do? Research Dr. Valdez. Find out where he came from, what his credentials are, who hired him. Use your mother's connections if necessary, but be discreet. And what will you be doing? Keeping an eye on Tommy and his father, and preparing for the possibility that this situation gets worse before it gets better. That evening, Zara sat in her room reviewing everything she knew about Catherian military doctrine. Their species was patient and methodical, preferring to gather intelligence for extended periods before striking. If survivors were operating on Earth, they would have spent months or years infiltrating human institutions and identifying key targets. The fact that they had revealed themselves suggested that their timeline was accelerating. Either they were ready to begin active operations, or they felt pressured to act before their presence was discovered. Her computer chimed with an encrypted message from Tommy. His father had identified the source location of one of the mysterious transmissions, a warehouse district on the outskirts of the city. Dr. Patterson wanted to investigate, but Tommy was trying to convince him to involve official security forces first. Zara typed back quickly. Tell him to wait. Do not investigate alone. We'll explain tomorrow. She closed the laptop and looked out her bedroom window at the city lights spread below. Somewhere out there, enemy agents were implementing a plan that could threaten everything she had fought to protect. The wars she thought she had ended were continuing in a new form, with new battlefields. But this time, she wasn't commanding fleets and armies. She was working with a handful of teenagers and one civilian scientist against opponents who had learned from their previous defeats. The challenge was greater than anything she had faced among the stars. Zara smiled grimly as she prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring new dangers and difficult decisions. But for the first time since returning to Earth, she felt like herself again. Not a displaced military commander trying to fit into civilian life, but a strategic thinker facing a problem that required everything she had learned about warfare, intelligence, and human nature. High school had taught her valuable lessons about operating in complex social environments. Now it was time to see if those lessons could help her save the world again. One careful move at a time. Outside her window, the stars watched silently as Earth spun through space, unaware that ancient enemies were stirring in the shadows, preparing for a war that most humans didn't even know was coming. 3 weeks into October, Zara's carefully constructed normal life began to unravel in ways she hadn't anticipated. The first sign of trouble came during advanced physics, when their substitute teacher turned out to be someone who definitely didn't belong in a high school classroom. Dr. Valdez was supposedly filling in for their regular teacher, who had called in sick with flu symptoms. But Zara noticed immediately that his knowledge of terrestrial physics was oddly limited, while his understanding of theoretical frameworks suggested experience with technologies that didn't exist in standard textbooks. When he discussed energy transmission principles, his examples referenced concepts that reminded Zara of Nexari power distribution systems. When a student asked about practical applications, he mentioned crystal matrix configurations that were distinctly Cytherian in design. Most troubling of all, his eyes kept drifting to Zara throughout the lesson with an intensity that suggested recognition. After class, Zara lingered until the other students had left, then approached his desk with a casual question about homework assignments. Up close, she could see details that confirmed her suspicions. His skin had the faint translucent quality of someone who had spent time in artificial gravity environments. His movements were too precise, too economical, suggesting military training rather than academic background. "Interesting lecture, Dr. Valdez," she said. "Your perspective on energy dynamics is quite unique." "I've had some unusual educational experiences," he replied, his voice carrying a slight accent that reminded her of the border worlds where human and alien cultures intersected. "And you, Miss Chen, seem to have a remarkably sophisticated understanding of these concepts for someone your age." The way he said her name confirmed her worst fears. This wasn't a random encounter. He knew exactly who she was. "I've always been interested in science," she said carefully. "My parents are both researchers. Yes, I'm familiar with your family's work. And your own achievements, of course." His smile was polite but cold. "The Cytherian hegemony still speaks of you in their historical records. The little death, who dismantled their greatest fleet with nothing but brilliance and determination." Zara felt her muscles tense for combat, but forced herself to remain calm. They were in a classroom full of security cameras, and within shouting distance of other teachers. Whatever this man wanted, he wouldn't risk exposure by acting here. "I think you have me confused with someone else," she said. "I'm just a freshman trying to pass physics." "Of course. My mistake." His smile widened slightly. "Though I should mention that your friend Tommy Patterson's father has been asking some very interesting questions about those encrypted transmissions. It would be unfortunate if his research led him into dangerous territory." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Tommy and his father were now targets because of their investigation into the Cytherian signals. Zara had drawn them into a conflict they weren't equipped to handle. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Naturally. But perhaps you might mention to young Mr. Patterson that some puzzles are better left unsolved, for everyone's safety." Zara left the classroom with her mind racing through tactical possibilities. The enemy had revealed themselves sooner than expected, which suggested either confidence in their position or desperation to prevent further investigation. Either way, the situation had escalated beyond her ability to handle alone. She found Tommy at lunch, sitting with Jessica and a few other students. His animated discussion of weekend plans felt surreal given the threat that now hung over him and his father. "Tommy," she said quietly, "I need to talk to you, privately." They walked to their usual corner of the cafeteria, but Zara led him further away from other students. When she was certain they couldn't be overheard, she outlined her encounter with Dr. Valdez and the implications of his veiled threats. Tommy's face went pale as she explained. "You're saying there's an alien spy working as a substitute teacher at our school?" "Not alien," Zara corrected. "Human, but probably working for Cytherian survivors or some other hostile group. The important thing is that they know about your father's research and they consider it a threat. What do we do? Should we tell someone? Call the authorities?" Zara considered the options. Official channels would be slow and bureaucratic, assuming they believed the story at all. By the time proper security forces responded, the enemies would have disappeared or accomplished their objectives. "We need more information first," she said. "And we need to make sure your father is safe while we gather it. How do we do that?" "Carefully, and with help." That afternoon, Zara made a decision that would have seemed impossible a month earlier. She approached Jessica Martinez with a request that required revealing more about herself than she had planned. "Jessica, I need to ask you for a favor that's going to sound crazy." They were walking toward the parking lot after school, and Jessica looked at her with concern. "What kind of favor?" "The kind that might be dangerous but could help protect people from something much worse." Jessica stopped walking. "Zara, you're scaring me." "What's going on?" Over the next 20 minutes, Zara explained as much as she could without revealing the full scope of her background. She described the mysterious transmissions, the suspicious substitute teacher, and the potential threat to Tommy's family. She presented it as a case of possible espionage that required careful investigation. "So you want me to help you spy on a teacher who might be an enemy agent?" Jessica asked when Zara finished. "I want you to help us gather information that could prevent people from getting hurt," Zara said. "Your mother is on the city council. She has connections with local law enforcement and security services. If we can document evidence of suspicious activity, she might be able to get proper authorities involved." Jessica was quiet for a long moment, weighing the request against her normal, safe worldview. Finally, she nodded. "What do you need me to do?" "Research Dr. Valdez. Find out where he came from, what his credentials are, who hired him. Use your mother's connections if necessary, but be discreet." "And what will you be doing?" "Keeping an eye on Tommy and his father, and preparing for the possibility that this situation gets worse before it gets better." That evening, Zara sat in her room reviewing everything she knew about Kitherian military doctrine. Their species was patient and methodical, preferring to gather intelligence for extended periods before striking. If survivors were operating on Earth, they would have spent months or years infiltrating human institutions and identifying key targets. The fact that they had revealed themselves suggested that their timeline was accelerating. Either they were ready to begin active operations, or they felt pressured to act before their presence was discovered. Her computer chimed with an encrypted message from Tommy. His father had identified the source location of one of the mysterious transmissions, a warehouse district on the outskirts of the city. Dr. Patterson wanted to investigate, but Tommy was trying to convince him to involve official security forces first. Zara typed back quickly. "Tell him to wait. Do not investigate alone. We'll explain tomorrow." She closed the laptop and looked out her bedroom window at the city lights spread below. Somewhere out there, enemy agents were implementing a plan that could threaten everything she had fought to protect. The wars she thought she had ended were continuing in a new form, with new battlefields. But this time she wasn't commanding fleets and armies. She was working with a handful of teenagers and one civilian scientist against opponents who had learned from their previous defeats. The challenge was greater than anything she had faced among the stars. Zara smiled grimly as she prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring new dangers and difficult decisions. But for the first time since returning to Earth, she felt like herself again. Not a displaced military commander trying to fit into civilian life, but a strategic thinker facing a problem that required everything she had learned about warfare, intelligence, and human nature. High school had taught her valuable lessons about operating in complex social environments. Now it was time to see if those lessons could help her save the world again, one careful move at a time. Outside her window, the stars watched silently as Earth spun through space, unaware that ancient enemies were stirring in the shadows, preparing for a war that most humans didn't even know was coming. The warehouse district at 2 a.m. was a maze of shadows and industrial silence, broken only by the distant hum of automated security systems. Zara moved through the darkness with the fluid grace of someone who had learned to navigate hostile territory under fire, her enhanced vision picking out details that would be invisible to normal human eyes. She shouldn't be here alone. Every principle of tactical planning screamed against operating without backup or support. But Dr. Patterson had disappeared 6 hours ago, during what was supposed to be a routine investigation of the transmission source, and Tommy was being watched by people who would use him as leverage against anyone who tried to interfere. The official authorities had responded to Jessica's carefully worded reports with the bureaucratic efficiency of people who dealt with too many false alarms. Forms had been filed, investigations had been scheduled, and nothing immediate had been done. By the time proper security forces mobilized, the enemy would have accomplished their objectives and vanished. So Zara found herself back in familiar territory, outnumbered, outgunned, and responsible for protecting people who didn't fully understand the danger they faced. The warehouse that Dr. Patterson had identified as the transmission source loomed ahead, its bulk darker than the surrounding night. Zara approached from the east, using shipping containers and maintenance equipment as cover, while she studied the building's security arrangements. What she found was both reassuring and terrifying. The defenses were sophisticated but not overwhelming. sensor arrays that could detect most forms of intrusion, automated systems that would alert guards to unauthorized movement, and communication equipment that could summon reinforcements quickly. Professional work, but not beyond her ability to circumvent. The terrifying part was that the defenses were clearly designed by people who understood human military technology intimately. Every countermeasure was positioned to defeat the kind of tactics that Earth's security forces would use. Whoever was inside had studied human operational doctrine and prepared accordingly. Zara spent 40 minutes mapping the security perimeter before she found her entry point. A ventilation shaft on the north side was positioned just outside the primary sensor grid. Probably an oversight during installation. It would be a tight fit. But she had squeezed through smaller spaces during her campaigns among the stars. The shaft led into the warehouse's upper level, where she could see the full scope of the operation below. Her breath caught as she realized what she was looking at. The warehouse had been converted into a high-technology command center that would have impressed military planners on any world in the galaxy. Banks of communication equipment processed signals from across the solar system. Holographic displays showed real-time maps of Earth's major cities, orbital installations, and defensive positions. Analysis stations where human-appearing figures worked with technology that was definitely not of terrestrial origin. And in the center of it all, suspended in a containment field that flickered with familiar energy patterns, was Dr. Patterson. He was unconscious but appeared unharmed, his body held in stasis while medical scanners monitored his vital signs. Around him, technicians worked with equipment that Zara recognized as Catherian neural interface technology. They were extracting information directly from his mind, downloading everything he knew about human communication systems and defense protocols. Zara counted 12 operatives on the main floor, plus unknown numbers in adjacent rooms. All appeared human, but their movements and coordination suggested augmentation with alien technology. They were faster and stronger than baseline humans, with enhanced reflexes and sensory capabilities. Fighting her way through them would be possible but costly. She might be able to rescue Dr. Patterson, but the mission would be compromised and the intelligence value lost. More importantly, these operatives would scatter to other locations and resume their activities with improved security. Instead, Zara decided on a different approach. If they wanted to extract information, she would give them information. The wrong information, delivered in a way that would reveal their capabilities and objectives. She made her way to the warehouse's communication center, using air ducts and maintenance passages to avoid detection. The equipment was more sophisticated than anything in official use, capable of real-time communication with assets across multiple star systems. Perfect for what she had in mind. Zara spent 20 minutes programming a virus into the communication network. Not a destructive virus, but an information gatherer that would copy all transmissions and route duplicates to secure servers that Dr. Patterson had established for his research. Every message sent or received would be automatically recorded for later analysis. Then she began the second phase of her plan. Using the same network, Zara transmitted carefully crafted false intelligence to what appeared to be the operation's command structure. She reported that human security forces had discovered the warehouse and were planning a raid for the following morning. She included fabricated details about human capabilities that would force the enemy to reveal their own resources in response. Finally, she activated the building's fire suppression system. The warehouse erupted in controlled chaos as alarms sounded, and automated systems began flooding the main floor with fire-retardant foam. The operatives responded with trained efficiency, but their priorities became clear as Zara watched from her concealed position. They moved immediately to protect their communication equipment and data stores, confirming that intelligence gathering was their primary mission. They began emergency evacuation procedures that revealed the location of hidden exits and escape routes. Most importantly, they released Dr. Patterson from the containment field and administered medications to ensure his survival during transport. Zara followed them through the confusion, staying close enough to observe their methods while remaining undetected. The evacuation was smooth and well-rehearsed, suggesting that they had planned for discovery from the beginning. But it also revealed the location of their secondary facility, an abandoned subway station that had been converted into a backup command center. As the last operative disappeared into the tunnel system, Zara activated her emergency beacon. Jessica would receive the signal, and know to contact Tommy with the predetermined message that would bring proper authorities to investigate the warehouse. By morning, human security forces would have physical evidence of alien infiltration and technology to analyze. But the real victory was the intelligence she had gathered. The communication virus would provide detailed information about the enemy's network and objectives. The false intelligence she had transmitted would force them to react in ways that revealed their capabilities. Most importantly, she now knew where they were relocating and could plan accordingly. Dr. Patterson would probably be held at the secondary facility until the operatives decided whether he represented a continuing threat. Zara had perhaps 12 hours before they either released him or eliminated him as a security risk. Time enough for one more mission, if she planned it carefully. As she made her way back through the warehouse district, Zara reflected on how much her situation had changed in just a few hours. She was no longer pretending to be a normal high school student, dealing with academic and social challenges. She was back in her element, planning operations against sophisticated enemies who threatened everything she cared about. The difference was that this time, she wasn't alone. Tommy Patterson had proven himself capable of handling complex intelligence work. Jessica Martinez had shown courage and determination when faced with impossible circumstances. Even Derek Morrison, who had caused problems earlier, might prove useful if the situation required additional resources. Zara smiled as she disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness. High school had taught her valuable lessons about building teams and managing complex social dynamics. Now she would find out if those lessons could help her save Dr. Patterson and prevent an alien infiltration that could compromise Earth's security for generations. Some wars, she had learned, were fought not with fleets and armies, but with teenagers who refused to accept that adults knew best about everything. And sometimes, that was exactly the kind of war that mattered most. The abandoned subway station had been transformed into something that belonged in a science fiction movie, not beneath the streets of a peaceful Earth city. Zara studied the facility through thermal imaging equipment that Tommy had borrowed from his father's laboratory. Watching alien-enhanced humans move through corridors lined with technology that shouldn't exist. 12 hours had passed since Dr. Patterson's capture, and Zara's intelligence indicated that the enemy was preparing to relocate again. This time they would probably take their prisoner off-world beyond any hope of rescue. If she was going to act, it had to be now, but she wasn't acting alone. Security sweep completed. Jessica's voice whispered through the communication earpiece. No patrol activity on the eastern approach for the next 15 minutes. Communication intercepts confirmed their planning extraction in 47 minutes. Tommy added from his position at the mobile analysis station they had established in a maintenance tunnel. Transport vessel is already descending from orbit. Zara felt a surge of pride in her unlikely team. Jessica had used her mother's political connections to arrange for subtle official support, ensuring that human security forces would respond quickly once the operation was complete. Tommy had proven himself capable of real-time intelligence analysis under pressure, providing crucial tactical information throughout their surveillance of the facility. Even Derek Morrison had contributed to the mission, though he didn't know it. His uncle's authority as principal had been useful for explaining why certain students were absent from school, and his own reputation for causing trouble provided perfect cover for the unusual activities around the old subway entrance. Beginning final approach, Zara announced quietly. Remember, we extract Dr. Patterson and gather intelligence, but we don't engage unless absolutely necessary. These people are dangerous. Copy that, Jessica replied. Emergency services are standing by. Zara descended into the subway tunnel system through a maintenance shaft that bypassed the facility's primary defenses. Her equipment was lightweight but sophisticated, gear she had acquired during her military service and carefully maintained during her civilian life. Not enough for a full assault, but perfect for infiltration and extraction. The first challenge was getting past the perimeter sensors without triggering alarms. Zara used techniques she had learned during operations against Nexari installations, moving in patterns that confused automated detection systems while staying below their threshold for human-sized targets. The facility's layout was similar to the warehouse, but more compact and heavily defended. Dr. Patterson was being held in a secured area near the center, surrounded by both technological barriers and human guards. Getting to him would require either stealth or distraction. Zara chose distraction. Using the facility's own communication systems, she transmitted the emergency evacuation signal that her earlier intelligence gathering had identified. Throughout the complex, alarms began sounding as automated systems responded to reports of imminent discovery by human security forces. The response was immediate and revealing. The operatives moved with practiced efficiency, beginning evacuation procedures that confirmed they had always planned this location as temporary. But their priorities also became clear as Zara watched from concealment. They moved first to protect their most sensitive equipment and data. Then they began preparing their prisoner for transport, confirming that Dr. Patterson was valuable enough to risk taking with them, rather than simply eliminating him as a security threat. Zara used the confusion to penetrate deeper into the facility, following routes that her reconnaissance had identified as lightly defended during emergency operations. She moved like smoke through corridors filled with alien technology and enhanced humans, staying ahead of search teams while closing on her objective. Dr. Patterson was unconscious but stable when she reached the holding area. The guards had left to assist with the evacuation, leaving only automated systems to maintain security. Zara disabled the containment field with equipment designed for exactly that purpose, then administered stimulants to bring him back to consciousness. "Dr. Patterson," she whispered as he began to stir, "we need to move. Can you walk?" His eyes focused on her with difficulty. "Miss Chen? How did you—" "Where are we?" "Underground facility. Enemy operation. I'll explain later, but right now we need to get out before they finish their evacuation." Dr. Patterson struggled to his feet, still groggy from whatever drugs they had used to keep him sedated. "They took everything. All my research, all the data about the transmissions. They know about Tommy. Tommy's safe," Zara assured him. "And we've been gathering intelligence on them while they held you. This isn't over." Getting out proved more challenging than getting in. The evacuation was nearly complete, which meant most of the facility's personnel were now concentrated near the exit routes. Zara had to choose between speed and stealth. Knowing that either choice carried significant risks, she chose speed. Moving quickly through corridors that were supposed to be secure, Zara led Dr. Patterson toward the emergency exit she had identified during reconnaissance. Behind them, she could hear voices and footsteps as search teams discovered the empty holding cell. They reached the exit just as the first pursuit team rounded the corner behind them. Zara pushed Dr. Patterson up the emergency ladder while she covered their retreat with equipment that created sufficient noise and confusion to mask their escape. "Fruit." They emerged into pre-dawn darkness just as Jessica's voice crackled through the communication system. "Transport is moving. Large vessel departing from the vicinity of your position." Above them, a ship that belonged in deep space rather than Earth's atmosphere rose silently into the morning sky. It was sleek and fast, clearly designed for covert operations, and it carried with it the evidence of alien infiltration that could have changed everything. But it also left behind equipment, data, and intelligence that would prove invaluable for understanding the scope of the threat. "Dr. Patterson is secure," Zara reported as they made their way to the extraction point, where Jessica waited with emergency medical personnel. Beginning secondary objectives. The next 6 hours were a blur of official interviews, medical examinations, and carefully managed information sharing. Jessica's mother had indeed arranged for discreet official support, ensuring that the right people knew about the alien infiltration without creating public panic. Dr. Patterson was treated for the effects of neural interface exposure and declared physically unharmed. His debriefing provided crucial information about enemy capabilities and objectives. Most importantly, the intelligence that Zara's team had gathered painted a clear picture of a long-term infiltration effort that had been operating for months. By afternoon, human security forces were conducting coordinated raids on locations identified through the communication intercepts. Most of the sites had been abandoned, but enough evidence remained to confirm the reality of the threat and justify increased defensive measures. That evening, Zara sat in the hospital cafeteria with Tommy and Jessica, finally able to process what they had accomplished. Dr. Patterson was safe. The immediate threat had been neutralized, and humanity's security forces were now aware of the ongoing danger. "So what happens now?" Tommy asked. "Do we go back to being normal high school students?" Zara considered the question seriously. The alien infiltration had been discovered and disrupted, but it was clearly part of a larger pattern. Other cells were probably operating in different locations, and the ship that had escaped would report back to whoever was coordinating these operations. "I think our definition of normal might have changed," she said finally. "But yes, we go back to school. We take our tests and do our homework and worry about homecoming dances." "While also keeping an eye out for alien spies?" Jessica asked. "While also being ready for whatever comes next," Zara agreed. "Because this isn't over. It's probably just the beginning." Tommy nodded thoughtfully. "My dad says the government wants to set up a special monitoring program. Analyzing communication intercepts, tracking unusual activities, that kind of thing. He asked if I'd be interested in helping during summers and after school. And I said yes. But only if you two are involved as well." Jessica smiled. A career in counterintelligence wasn't exactly what I had planned for high school. But it beats worrying about whether my chemistry lab partner is actually working for alien invaders. 3 weeks later, Zara stood in the hallway of Westfield High School, watching her classmates navigate the familiar challenges of teenage life. Derek Morrison was trying to ask Emma Valdez to the winter formal. The drama club was rehearsing for their production of Romeo and Juliet. The football team was preparing for their final game of the season. Normal problems. Normal concerns. Normal lives lived by people who had no idea how close they had come to a very different kind of normal. But Zara also noticed things that others missed. New security cameras in subtle locations, teachers who paid attention to students in ways that suggested training beyond education, custodial staff who moved with the precision of people accustomed to dangerous work. The world was changing, adapting to threats that most people would never know existed. And Zara Chen was exactly where she needed to be, protecting humanity from dangers they couldn't see, using skills they couldn't imagine while pretending to worry about algebra tests and social studies projects. She had toppled empires among the stars and saved her species from extinction. But perhaps her greatest victory was learning that even small battles mattered, that protecting people meant more than commanding fleets, and that sometimes the most important wars were fought by teenagers who refused to accept that adults had all the answers. High school had nearly defeated her in ways that interstellar warfare never could. But in the end, it had also taught her something that no military academy could provide: the value of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when the stakes were high enough. As the bell rang for her next class, Zara gathered her books and prepared to face another day of pretending to be normal. But now she knew the truth that her younger self had missed. Being normal didn't mean being powerless. It meant being ready for anything, while making sure that most people never had to be ready for anything at all. Outside the classroom windows, the sky was clear and peaceful. But Zara knew that somewhere among those distant stars, new threats were stirring, new challenges were taking shape. When they came, humanity would be ready, and if necessary, a high school student with impossible experience would be standing between the darkness and the light, making sure that normal life could continue for everyone who deserved to live it. Some victories, she had learned, were measured not in fallen empires but in preserved innocence, and that was a war worth fighting forever.